You to this morning's committee hearing. I'm joined today by my friend and colleague, Mr. Tony Cardenas. I do anticipate within the next few minutes or so that we will have a quorum. At this point, we will begin. We'll start, Mr. City Attorney, all the actions we'll take will be a communique of the chair until we get at least one other member and we have a quorum. Okay? Do I have any public comment cards? I thought I saw one. So what we'll do, we'll start off with public comment, and you must be a mind reader. No, you know that the card had your name on it. So
it does, sir. Now,
I would have messed you up if I'd have called somebody's name and made you get out of the chair.
Or I'd have to done a quick imitation.
Okay. No Weiss.
Thank you.
Start off today's meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Good morning. I wanted just to again indicate, particularly since the Housing Department is here today, the need for the Housing Department to advise tenants and conversions. And I know this is an important issue to you, Herb, because a couple years ago you wanted to equalize the treatment of tenants and conversions with tenants and demolitions. Tenants and conversions have a special right that tenants and demolitions don't have, and that's the right to terminate their lease unilaterally and collect their relocation money once the track map approval has been applied for and procured. To date, in looking at the materials from the Housing Department website, there still is nothing on the website that it clearly, accurately informs the tenants that they have this right. Housing Department needs to step up and basically get it done. Two, again, Herb, as chairman of the committee, I just want to reiterate my request. I know you're thoughtful and considerate relative to these issues, but I think it really is important that a member of the Housing Department have and make a presentation, or at least be available to describe to this committee any problems, any difficulties that they have had, and how they've solved them. And it will afford the public an opportunity to communicate to you and to the Housing Department at the same time. And I think that would be a very worthwhile public service. After all, you people are the policymakers, and they need to be responsive to you as well as to us. Third, relative to the situation on Lincoln Place, again, the monument to the planning failure of the City of LA, I believe it's important that the Housing Department, particularly since AIMCO has returned the LSAC declaration. We have to get this case solved. We have 38 acres of vacant apartments in the midst of a housing crisis. This cannot be acceptable to anybody. In order to get it resolved, I believe the Housing Department can and should be directed to return the LSAC declarations that AIMCO filed in 2005. As one who's involved in the bowels of this case, in the meat and potatoes of this case, I can tell you that this will go a long way toward getting it resolved at the earliest possible time, possibly even by the end of the year. So again, I'm throwing this out in the hopes that maybe the message at some point can get across. Obviously, Mr. Rosendahl, it's in his district. He has to be the prime mover of it, but nevertheless, maybe his people listen to this, and to the extent, Herb, Andrew and I had a very nice conversation at the Beverly Hills Board of Realtors. He assured me of your support for TOPA, which I appreciate very much, and the hope is that we can basically make that as viable as the inclusionary zoning alternative as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We were joined by Councilmember Perry, so we do have a quorum. So at this point, Ms. Barclay, I think we can dispense of, unless some of the other council members have some questions or concerns, items 1 through 9. So let's start off with item 1.
Meg Barclay with the CLA's office. Item 1 is a report from the Community Redevelopment Agency and the City Administrative Officer relative to the issuance of tax-exempt multifamily housing revenue bonds for the Angeles Plaza project.
Okay, then on item 1, we'll adopt the CAO report. Item 2.
Item 2 is a report from the CRA and the Chief Legislative Analyst relative to increasing the purchase order for Myers, Naves, Ryback, Silver, and Wilson to defend litigation filed by Regency Outdoor Advertising.
Item 2 will adopt the CLA report. Item 3 will continue that item. That brings us to item 4.
Item 4 is a report from the CRA and the CAO relative to awarding contracts on an as-needed basis for sustainability consulting services.
Okay, on item 4, we'll adopt the CAO report. Item 5.
I have a question on item 4, I'm sorry.
On item 4, okay, so then what we'll do, item 4, we will hold that and deal with that when we go through the consent calendar. Item 5.
Item 5 is a report from the CRA and the CAO and a resolution relative to a cooperation agreement between the CRA and the Bureau of Street Lighting for new decorative street lighting within the Pacific Corridor redevelopment project area.
Okay, on item 5, we'll adopt the CAO report. That brings us to item 6.
Item 6 is a report from the Community Development Department and the CAO relative to amending the repayment terms of loan agreement with Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Community Services Center.
Okay, Mr. Cardenas has a question on item 6, so we'll hold that as well. That brings us to item 7.
Item 7 is a motion, Wesson Garcetti, relative to securing a dedicated low-income housing tax credit allocation from the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee.
Okay, then on item 7, without objection, we'll adopt that motion. Item 8.
Item 8 is a motion, Wesson Perry, relative to restructuring project financing to assist home buyers at the Santa Ana Pines Mosaic Development in South Los Angeles, the Enterprise Homeownership Partners, and the Pierce Borden Development in Pacoima.
So then, without objection, we'll adopt the motion on item 8. Item 9.
Item 9 is a motion, Wesson Perry, relative to the reprogramming of community development block grant and home investment partnership funds to benefit the Handyworker Program, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and the Urgent Repair Program.
Okay, then without objection, we'll adopt that motion as well. That will bring us to item 11.
Item 11 is a report from the city attorney and ordinance relative to repealing Section 12.39 and amending Section 12.03 of the Los Angeles Municipal Code.
Without objection, we'll adopt the city attorney's report and draft an ordinance. That brings us back to item 4. So if you could read item 4 again, and whoever's here to speak on that, if we could bring them forward. Mr. Cardenas has a question or two.
Item 4 is reports from the CRA and the CAO relative to awarding contracts on an as-needed basis for sustainability consultation services.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you very much. These consulting services, who provides those consulting services? What licenses are required, if any, for them to do this kind of work? And is this something that we've done in the past? And if we have, how long have you been enlisting these kinds of services?
Not to my knowledge, we haven't done sustainability consultation services. The CRA has contracts with for as-needed services for architectural services, landscape architecture services, and so forth. This one is specifically geared towards providing sustainability consultation services for projects that meet the green building ordinance that occur in CRA redevelopment project areas. So these services would be provided for projects that are 50 units or more, 50,000 square feet or more, or that the CRA provides $250,000 or more in financial assistance to. So this is the first time that we've done this. It's a part of the citywide work to promote green building in the city of Los Angeles.
What kind of contracts would these organizations have?
We'd be opening a 2-year contract with all 31 firms that we're recommending. The work would be issued on an as-needed basis. We did a rough estimation that in the 2 years there would be roughly 100 projects that may need these services, but maybe more because we're also offering it voluntary to anybody that wants it, and also maybe less if there's less housing activity than there was in fiscal year 07, which is when we based the 100 projects on. They would get work. We've had a cap for the per consultation. Each individual consultation, we put a cap of $5,000 on that consultation. So no one consultation would be exceed the amount of $5,000.
Okay. Now, there was a request for qualifications put out in June?
I think so, maybe. It closed in.
That is correct. We had an RFQ issued, and we received, I think, 78 applications. We had interdepartmental, 47, I apologize. 78 firms were interested, and 47 were received. We had interdepartmental panel consisting of Bureau General Services and Bureau of Engineering and us at the CRA, and we selected the 31 firms that we felt were qualified to perform these quote-unquote sustainability consultation services. Just to clarify a little bit, we're anticipating very broad technical spectrum for these services. So it can range from, a microclimate analysis to natural ventilation studies to solar path analysis to site orientations to green financing. We really want every project that comes into CRA project area to be pushed towards green early on and as soon as we find out about it. So we will run every project that comes to CRA through this program and allow developers, owners, or nonprofits or even city departments that are doing street repayments to do, for instance, an impervious impavement. And we will help them do a feasibility study. How much will that cost extra, or how much will that? So the whole idea behind the program is to push every project that comes into CRA towards green.
Now, of the 31 that the staff is recommending, how many of those have been identified as being minority or women businesses?
I don't have that information right here, but we can provide that to you.
We have them on the list. I don't know the number.
I don't have the number.
And how many of them are considered headquarters based here in Los Angeles?
Over 80%, I'm sure.
Headquarters, not that they have offices.
Oh, I see.
Big difference.
That's a difference. We will have to get back.
I'll have to check the list, and we can provide it to you today.
Okay. And this list will start to be utilized in December?
November 1.
The target was November 1st. We wanted to launch it at or before the Green Building Ordinance of the City of Los Angeles takes effect. That was our initial goal, but it'll take place whenever it's adopted by council.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think this is an appropriate effort for the city to engage in, but one of the things that I want to make sure that the staff answers to the city council is the breakdown of LA headquartered businesses on the list, California headquartered businesses on the list, and maybe weeby businesses on the list. And also I would recommend that staff read all the segments of the city charter when it comes to contracting with third parties, and you'll notice there is some language where, all things being equal, we have a responsibility to do business with businesses that are in LA County and the state of California headquartered, okay? If you read that and you scratch your head and say, I don't know what the councilman's talking about, I don't read this, I can't find it in the charter, please come to my office and we'll read it together, okay? And next time any one of you are before any committee that I'm involved in, and we're having third-party contracts or proposed lists or what have you, you need to have those answers ready, because that is part of the city charter, and it is something that unfortunately, as policymakers, elected officials, and as staff in the city, we have not been paying attention to that as we should. Thank you. I'm done.
Okay. Well, Mr. Cardenas makes a very excellent point, and I would suggest to the departments that appear before this committee in the future that that information should just, as the norm, be part of your presentation. So from this moment on, we will make that the law of the land where it relates to this committee.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point something out.
Even if you don't get, let's say if we move it on, consider you don't get questioned about it, that information should be readily available. Mr. Cardenas.
I want to point out, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your remarks, but also in my remarks today, I never said that we would make affirmative action type actions. I never said that. My exact words to you of the recommended list, how many are maybe, weeby, local firms, etc. I never asked you to go ahead in your process to choose out those firms and give those firms any extra points or to give them any extra favor. I never said that. But understand this, whenever you go out on an RFQ or an RFP, Proposition 209, you might want to read that as well. Proposition 209 does not preclude us from putting extra effort into reaching out to certain communities so that we have a much more broad pool of applicants so that then we can treat them equally and then, pick them on their merits. Do you get what I'm saying? Proposition 209, as a matter of fact, there was a court case, and even Pete Wilson and Dan Lundgren in that court case admitted to the courts that Proposition 209 does not apply to outreach. So, for example, if you are willing and wanting to make sure that you have a much more robust response and a much more diverse response, you may want to go ahead and do outreach to Spanish language periodicals. You may want to do outreach to gay and lesbian periodicals. You may want to do outreach to certain communities that perhaps normally don't fit on your typical list. There's nothing wrong with that. So if you end up getting more respondents from various parts of the community, then you treat them as equals, and then you decide who's qualified to make your recommended list. But Proposition 209, affirmative action, the initiative that passed in the state of California, was sustained by the courts. It was clarified in the courts by the proponents and the people who wrote it, Pete Wilson and Dan Lundgren, the then Attorney General and Governor of California, that Proposition 209 did not apply to outreach. You can outreach to various communities and put extra efforts in the outreach portion of it. When it comes to the actual selection, everybody has to be treated equal. Okay? Thank you, Mr.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cardenas. Then on item 4, we'll adopt the CAO report. That brings us to item 6. Thank you.
Item 6 is a report from the Community Development Department and the CAO relative to amending the repayment terms of the loan agreement with the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Community Services Center.
Good morning.
Good morning. Cliff Weiss from the Community Development Department.
Burrow Taylor from the CEO's office.
Okay, Mr. Cardenas had some
Yeah,
questions.
I have some questions. There's I'll explain to you where my question comes from. No, first I'm going to ask you a question about this particular organization. This item pertains to amending the loan agreement between the City of Los Angeles and the organization,
Yes, that's correct.
correct?
Yes.
Now, this organization, it appears that the outstanding loan balance was due July 1st of 2008, which means a date passed already, and that balance seems to have been $796,844,
That's correct.
right? Now, so they did or did not comply with the original contract?
Up to July 1st, they were in compliance, and their loan payments were current. Yes,
So they were current until July 1st. So it's kind of like a balloon payment,
exactly.
right? Okay, so when July 1st came along, the city expected a check to arrive by July 1st. It did not.
That's correct.
And so therefore, they still have this outstanding balance. And we're discussing now whether or not we're going to approve entering into a new contract and foregoing the old contract and just starting anew.
It would be a new, a revised contract, revised loan terms that will be fully amortized over the next 15 years.
Okay. Now, technically speaking, this organization is not in good standing with the City of Los Angeles at this moment in time?
I guess you could look at it that way. They did come to us back in the spring. I don't recall the exact date, but it was somewhere around April.
Before July 1st?
Yes.
And they let you know, it doesn't look like we got $796,000, so we need to talk about what we're going to do together here.
Yes.
Okay. But as of July 2nd, are they in good standing with the City of Los Angeles?
Technically, no.
Okay, technically, no. It's just like a credit report. If this were to show up on their credit report, it would show up that they're delinquent,
That's
right?
correct.
They're not delinquent on the payments, which were probably minuscule compared to $796,000 balance, right?
That's correct.
But if they had a credit report with the City of Los Angeles showing the interaction with the City of Los Angeles, they would show a delinquency of $796,844 plus penalties or whatever, if any. Correct? Okay. Where is it that your department puts that information so that other departments can know that this organization is not in good standing with your department?
If it got to the point where we had demanded payment and they refused or didn't contact us, normally we give borrowers at least 30 days to respond to our correspondence when they're delinquent. At that point, when they are delinquent, then if we become aware that other departments are involved with the same organization, we would probably let them know.
Probably let them know.
Well, in the course of, it doesn't come up very often, but that would be our process.
Okay. But the reason why I'm asking these questions, I really don't care what the name of this organization is. I just saw this as an opportunity to get clarity on how the City of Los Angeles is picking and choosing who is going to be seen as delinquent and therefore does not have favor with the various departments within the city, and who is going to be considered, even though we're renegotiating $800,000, they're cool. And if they want to go ahead and get some more money from the city next month or early next year or next summer or what have you, this does not come into play in the discussion. Because I had somebody approach my office and said, I want to do some business with CRA. And then all of a sudden CRA said, well, they're not in good standing with the housing department. And then all of a sudden we get the information from the housing department, and they did some reorganizing as well on some of their records, as far as I can tell, or what have you. But CRA is saying they're not in good standing. They had some issues with another department. But they did renegotiations as well. Maybe not identical to this situation. But then again, what I don't like, and what I don't ever want to see, is when certain departments say, you know what, I don't like you. But guess what? Technically speaking, we can deny you based on some of your activity with us. And then there's another organization that staff really likes, but they have $800,000 outstanding. They did renegotiate. They did get back in good standing, but there was a period of time where technically speaking, and I'm using your words, technically speaking, they are not in good standing today.
Councilman,
Yes.
just wanted to add that when we do go to collections, which is generally 60 days afterwards, or attempts
And
to
we're
do the
beyond
workout,
60 days from July 1st.
right, we would send it to the city attorney's office. In this case, we're in the process of doing the workout. There is a city attorney's office that does collections for the city, and that's the centralized pool of information that any department can check. And there's another step within the city process with the CAO's office that does keep a list of organizations that are in complete default or in bad standing with the city.
But also at the same time, I'm sure there's ways of looking at somebody who's in bad standing, maybe on a $5,000 payment and they're 2 months behind, versus somebody who's got an $800,000 balance, and they were honest, we just don't got the money. We got to talk here.
Right.
$10,000 harm to the city potentially, $800,000 potential harm to the city. But which is worse? Don't just shake your head. I'm asking you a real question. Which is worse?
It's the organization that does not communicate with the city or continues to avoid any communications. So right now, in terms of process side of it, any organization that's in communication with us and is attempting to do workout, we have them in technical default. A organization, and we do have some of those that have either went out of business or just avoid any attempts for communication, are what we send to the city attorney for legal collections. So we don't do the legal collections within the community development department.
Attitude does come into play as to categorically what pot they're going to be put in.
And like you referenced in terms of your credit card company, if you're talking to your credit card company, they'll continue to talk with you. If you avoid your credit card company, they'll send you to collections and send a bigger and more aggressive strategy for collections. And most of the organizations that we deal with are nonprofits and small businesses that, we try from our department to do everything possible to keep them in good standing. And unfortunately, we probably are going to see a number of restructuring deals coming through. We are taking a very close look at that, and I think that's one report that we would love to bring in front of committee to discuss in terms of our overall portfolio. It is a bigger issue that we'll be addressing, but we're trying to get ahead of the curve here rather than wait for the tough economic times to catch up with many of these outstanding loans.
Okay. My main question is this. If your department, or either one of your, who do you work for now?
Community Development Department, still here, just like,
If the Community Development Department looks at somebody who wants to do business with your department, and you see that they're on some kind of list of delinquency of some sort, or what have you, are you precluded from moving forward and considering doing business with them, or is it a discretionary decision?
I believe that if they are on the CAO, and CAO would probably be the best to answer the question, but if they are on a debarment list, yes, we are prohibited from doing any business with the city. If they're not in good standing in terms of the state corporate status, we are prohibited from doing any business with them as well. If they do not have a current business license, we're prohibited doing business.
Okay. Yeah, but the state corporate status and their business license, that's black and white.
Right.
But this is not black and white.
The CAO debarment list is a black and white as well. There is a debarment list of organizations that we are prohibited to do business with that the CAO maintains.
Now, if they're on the list in February of 2008 and they clarify everything, they get up to speed and they're not delinquent on payments or balances or balloon payments that are due or what have you, and it's July 1st, and they want to start dealing with one of the city departments. But they were on that bad list in February. But since then, everything is current.
I believe so. I believe there is a way to get out. I'm not real familiar.
No, but what I'm saying is there like, well, you were on the list on February of 2008. You got off the list on March 31st, 2008.
Right.
Departments are not allowed to do business with them for 2 years or 2 months, or is it a black and white, you're on the list today, you better clear it up, and until you get it cleared up and you're in good standing with all of our city departments, we are not going to consider doing business with you? Or is there a timeline that they have to wait?
Okay. And, no, I don't know that answer.
Do you know that?
No, sir, I
Does anybody in the room know this?
Borough
The question is this: if somebody gets on this bad list, that departments are supposed to pay attention to this bad list and say, we can't do business with you right now. You're not in good standing with those guys, that department, or this, or my department, if I'm a department head. When is it that once they are in good standing, do they get off that list? And then, therefore, when is it that the city departments can start considering doing business with them? Anybody know the answer to that? Come forward, please.
Good morning, Mercedes Marquez, the Housing Authority. The city has a business policy, right, that outlines what information you have to have when you have to have it, and what would constitute a default, right? Broadly speaking, default can be for big things, small things. The issue of having a penalty, not being able to go for so long, largely depends on the type of dollar that is involved, because those dollars, as you trace them through, the federal government has its own policies about that money. So generally, what would happen is that the city policy would trace back to that money to make sure we're in compliance with federal dollars. So for instance, when we're talking about CDBG or we're talking home dollars, that kind of thing, eventually what you'd have to do is pursue a process to do something called debarment, right? And that could have the penalty of a year, 2 years, it could be 5 years,
And that's
depending.
on other agencies' guidelines.
Right,
not
it's the
ours.
federal government, it's HUD's guidelines. And everyone has, most federal governments, most federal agencies have some form of that process. In LHD, as we follow the city policy, where you see it for us all the time, every year, is round after round of the trust fund. Because for us, every agency has to be, they have to be okay with everybody, which is why when you gave your example of the CRA coming to you and said LHD, that's because LHD, every time we do a trust fund round, contacts the CRA and contacts CDD. At the beginning of the process, as we're doing the initial underwriting, where are these people with you? But then we do a second underwriting. At the end of the process, before we close, right, so once we've approved, you all have approved that, and we're closing the loan, we ask again, so that before they can go forward, so all of these months, it might be a 6-month period, they must be in compliance the entire time. Big or small, they have to be in compliance. And we see that as just an issue of transparency, right? And it's an issue of underwriting. What kind of a risk are you? So it matters where you are with everybody in the city. And for us, we don't wait. We're not waiting around for whether you're contacting us or you're not contacting us. When we see in our monitoring that there's a problem, we call you in and let you know. We don't wait until the application is before us, right? So that we keep a list. When I first arrived in the first year, we did something called Operation Clean House. And we did a risk assessment of all of those deals, big and small, a huge default, a small breach, and brought them in. It ended up being about 50 deals that we brought in, and we went through one deal. It didn't matter who you were. One deal after another, after another, after another. What is the problem here? Most of those deals, as a result, we were able to get people right back into compliance, right? They filed their reports, and in many cases, paid back money, and I was able to deobligate. That led to a turnaround of over $25 million that the Housing Department was able to free up either by having it repaid with interest or by deobligating something that was in the department. And after that, people understood that we were going to do business very differently. That shed
And that's
shockwave.
that's a good thing.
Yeah, it was a good thing. We stopped fighting about lots of things. And now, though many of you know in your districts that every now and then I have a collections issue, and I'm tough about it. That's why, because we're going to hear about it. This is program income. At a time when the money is being cut, either we collect it or we can't give it to anybody else. So, but we're also in the loop with CDD. They are among the agencies that we immediately contact twice in any deal to tell us where they are with them.
Now, thank you, and I appreciate you bringing us policymakers up to speed, because I've had developers who did business with the City of Los Angeles 20 years ago, and they just got this idea that a councilman can just call a department and say, give this guy a loan.
They absolutely
And
had that.
I sure as hell don't want to be, I don't want to be doing that, because I am not an underwriter. I am not an underwriter.
May you be blessed, sir.
I'm a councilman. I'm not an underwriter. The departments have their job. I have my job. We all have distinct responsibilities. But I'm almost done, Mr. Chairman. As an example, thank you for that clarification. As an example, the one before us, item number 6, this organization and them renegotiating their $796,000, $844 loan, they are on I'll call it this, they are on the blacklist today until this gets through the council and that loan is refied, or they never made the blacklist because they were honest and forthright in the springtime. They came to us and said, July 1st is coming, we're letting you know, we need to talk because we don't have the cash, we need to either refi or help us figure out how to get back into good standing, because on July 2nd, you're not going to be satisfied.
You're absolutely correct. We would not do any additional business with them or extend any other loan terms until this is actually rectified.
Okay, and then once it is rectified, based on these kinds of monies, do they have like a 6-month, a 12-month period before they can re-engage on a new project with the city, or?
No, they would be eligible to.
Okay.
Yes, Borough Taylor from the CEO's office. Just a point of clarification. The CEO does not maintain a list of the delinquent contractors, but we will talk to the city attorney and get this information back to you as if whether there is a city policy for loans that are not in good standing and how long they have to wait before they can contract again.
Okay, so the CEO does not keep a master list.
At this time.
Thank you for clarifying, because I thought we were good. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like for either all the departments or the city attorney to take the lead, or somebody to go ahead and let us as policymakers know where and when that master list is kept, who keeps it, and how often it's updated, etc.
Yes.
Because my whole point today is fairness. If somebody's not in good standing, whether you like them or not, whether I like them or not, whether they're obnoxious or not, whether they're the nicest person in the world, they should be treated as equals. Whether the biggest corporation in the world, whether they're a not-for-profit, or some individual who just doesn't get it. Everybody, every organization should be treated equally. And we avoid lawsuits, too.
Yeah, we agree.
That way. Thank you. Look forward to that. Thank you very much, Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Reyes?
So Mercedes answered most of my questions, but I did want to just give a different point of view in that we find ourselves administering funds, addressing needs in our community, and many times we do work with entities because they have no other recourse. There are reasons why we have certain types of programs that assist businesses and assist nonprofits. You know, we do have a history of redlining in the city with our insurance, with our banking industry. And so I want to make sure that the message is not that we don't want to serve our communities and communities of need. It's just that I'm hearing we want to be fair about how we treat them. But we do have a purpose in the city. There's a reason why there's block grants, why we had all the different financial and community building services that otherwise wouldn't be found in the private sector. And there's a reason why we promote policies that we do that enhance our communities, and for the most part, a good number of them would not be accepted at banks. So I just want to make sure that that message is also there. But thank you.
Is that it, Mr. Reyes? Okay, then on item 6, we will adopt the CAO report. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, we need to reconsider item 9 and have a vote on that. Mr. Cardenas needs to recuse himself from this item.
Also, for the record, I just want to let the public know that I am recusing myself on item number 9. There was a routine vote taken on item number 9, but also for the record, unless somebody, one of our staff here wants to correct me, I just want to point out that we will have an opportunity for me to recuse myself appropriately on that vote, but I also want to state that no discussion was made in this committee on that item. So I was not inappropriately in the room when any discussion was had. I do apologize. I was trying to follow the calendar and the votes. I thought we went from item 8 and then skipped all the way to item number 11. And unfortunately, we went through item number 9 and had a routine vote. But there was no discussion while I was in the room on item number 9.
Okay, if this is because of a potential conflict question, I believe you need to state.
I'm recusing myself on just out of an abundance of caution. My attorney and the city attorney has let me know that as far as they can tell, there is no conflict direct, but just out of an abundance of caution and appearance of, I am recusing myself.
Okay, we will allow you a few moments. Yeah, Mr. Reyes says a few moments of silence. Okay, so then without objection on item 9, we will adopt the motion. That now brings us to item 10. Ms. Barclay, if you could read item 10.
Item 10 is a motion, Garcetti Alarcon, relative to the Housing and Recovery Act of 2008 guidelines, the city's program design and action plan, best practices for pursuing funding in consultation with nonprofits and other relevant organizations, and establishing a nonprofit holding company.
Why don't we do this?
All right.
Okay, thank you. Mercedes, before you start, Councilmember Perry has some questions or would like to make a statement.
I wanted to put these questions on the record, and then, Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, I have a multitude of questions for myself and on behalf of Mr. Garcetti, and I think this will require a report back. And then I want to put this in context. The reason that I'm putting these questions on the record is because I believe the application to HUD to obtain these funds is due on December the 1st, 2008, and we have to have a strategy in place so that the funds are spent within 18 months of receipt. Obviously, the Housing Department will come back to the committee and council for approval, and in all likelihood, it would be folded into this year's consolidated plan. So I want to put that in context. Basically, what I'm saying is we have to have a very, very tight strategy in place to be competitive, to prevail in the competitive process, and to be able to implement, should we be fortunate enough to receive these funds, within a very, very, very tight time frame. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm looking to avoid a lot of diversion of money for other issues, other departments, projects outside of the Housing Department, and that sort of thing. CD9 has the highest percentage of foreclosed multifamily properties in the city. And I think those are a lot more complicated than single-family homes. And it's more difficult to establish an ownership opportunity for tenants. For example, in June 2008, there were 305 multifamily foreclosures in the CD9. Mr. Parks and Mr. Wesson had the second and third highest amount of multifamily foreclosures in the city. CD9 also had its share of single-family foreclosures, ranking number 8 in the city with a total of 369 homes. Mr. Zine, Mr. Alarcon, and Mr. Smith had the first, second, and third amount of foreclosed single-family homes in the city. So as you see, this is a broad impact. Given that, I would really appreciate the department coming back with their strategy for acquiring, rehabilitating, and leasing properties as sustainable and affordable housing. That's one. If multifamily property or a single-family home is deemed infeasible to rehabilitate, what are the city's options for disposition? What's the strategy for acquiring, rehabilitating, and leasing single-family homes? Included in that, will there be an option for lease option? And what are the federal regulations on that issue regarding resale? I know not all of the foreclosed properties in the city are going to be handled through neighborhood stabilization, but give us estimates on how many properties you think LAHD will be able to acquire and rehab. I'll give you a copy of this list when I'm done.
Thank you.
Yes, I know. And I'm almost done. Who are the targeted buyers? And at what AMI range are we going to look at? And how are we going to make sure the new buyers are home ownership prepared? One of the biggest issues that remains is what happens to people who cannot afford to stay in their homes. What options are available for them? What city resources do we leverage to help those facing foreclosure to find alternative housing options? Now, recently, the State Attorney General announced a settlement with Countrywide that included renegotiation of some mortgages. Would you tell us the impact of that in terms of our ability to keep people in their homes? And here is the essence of why I am saying all this, and I think I'm challenging what is traditional behavior, to give the same amount of money to each council district, while each council district may not be affected in the same way. So we'll be asking you to tell us how the funds will be distributed across the city, whether or not they should be divided by 15, or whether they should be given in terms of a proportional share given the impact of foreclosures, whether it be multifamily or single family. They're basically concentrating on the areas that have been hardest hit, or is there a component of that analysis? And again, this is a challenge that we've been dealing with since 2001. Those areas, districts that welcome or encourage the development of affordable housing, because not every council district has that desire in its leader or in some of its communities. And so what do we do with that should we get the money? Now, I know that housing is going to partner with outside entities and that they're considering other community partners, and I hope that you'll make sure, and Mr. Chair, I know you'll make sure this happens, HCED participates in this process. And then I also want you to come back and tell us on the record, HR 3221 establishes a permanent affordable housing trust fund, and we need to know how that will be administered and how it will interact with the city's affordable housing trust fund. I wanted to put these questions on the record first because this is a big item in the event that we run out of time. And then I just have one verbal motion, Mr. Chair, which I'll give a copy to the CLA. Hope I get a second to make a verbal motion directing the Housing Department to work directly with all 15 council offices in selecting sites in each council district for funding pursuant to HR 3221. I'm also asking the Housing Department, after we're done today, if you could respond and just give us a sense of how long it would take for you to be able to meet or interact with each council office to discuss the site selection and be ready to put that on the record also so we can meet our December 1st deadline.
Okay, before we, well, Mr. Reyes is going to second that, But before you start your presentation, I wanted to ask a question, if you could just answer this, and then I'll let you do your presentation. Now, aren't there some restrictions where it relates to how this money, in the event that we get it, could be spent? So it might, and maybe I'm wrong here, there may be council districts that, regardless of their rate, may not even qualify for that. So you may want to amend the motion to just deal with the council districts, because see, my guess is, or what my understanding is like Mr. Zine's district wouldn't qualify for much of this. Well, anyway, I'm going to let you answer the question, then we'll figure out the best way to move forward with Ms. Perry's motion.
Before you move on, I guess I'm not surprised that Mr. Zine or Mr. Smith fell into the category of single-family residential and the higher foreclosure rate because of the nature, the configuration, the demographics of their district. All I'm asking for, again, is a good streamlined process. And you know, we can hear what they have to say, but I am concerned that should we be fortunate enough to receive this money, that it stay within the housing department and not be diverted to other departments or for other projects outside of the scope of the housing department, because I think we'll end up hurting ourselves and diminish what we get, if we get anything.
I heard you.
Okay.
The money is quite restricted. You're correct. And it restricts, the HUD has laid out the regulations. We sent you, I think about 10 days ago, an outline of the basic opportunities and restrictions on how the money can be used and cannot be used. The process is such that the money is due, Councilwoman is correct, the process is due at HUD on December 1st. It will come as a substantial amendment to our current consolidated plan. That is the legal form in which they've prescribed it. That has several requirements under the consolidated planning process. One of the things that HUD has done has curtailed the amount of public comment time. There will be public comment, but they've curtailed the time only because they're asking you to get it in by December 1, so there literally isn't time in their calendar for their usual process. We will publish all of that, but what we are doing, and I've had a discussion with the staff for the chairman's office about this, to lay out a timeline that will move us from all of the different discussions we need to have both publicly and with your districts about what's going on, to moving it through the mayor's office, through this committee, and ultimately through to the city council as a whole, so that we are on time when we do this. A couple of things I think are very important to note. One, the Office of Inspector General has deemed this program, the whole $3.9 billion nationally, as a high-risk program. That means they are paying enormous attention. They're telling you right up front, we're going to be auditing you all the way through. In the regulations, there is an 18-month period, the Councilwoman again is correct, by which this money must be committed. That could mean a lot of things, but it's very hard to do in 18 months, particularly in a city as large as ours. However, we aim to be absolutely, have all of the dollars committed by that time for the following reasons. The state of California, separate from the direct allocations that went to different communities, received a separate share of $145 million. I have every intention of putting us in a position to compete for that money, in addition to what we receive as a direct allocation. I have every indication from many sources and said in public places that the city of Los Angeles is further ahead than any other city in the state of California to move forward to be in a position to collect that money. It is also true that after 18 months, when HUD and the Office of Inspector General make their audit, they are going to reclaim dollars from communities that have not spent it nationwide. And then there will be a third opportunity, maybe even a fourth opportunity, to come at this money. So my goal is to always be prepared to do more and to do it in phases, right? So that if we look at different funding rounds, each is a separate phase, which is, I think, the only thing that we can do, because we can't predict what we might receive apart from the first allocation. That means that the program design that we're considering, and that we've had some general, more than some general discussion with many of you about, is one that takes a look. Okay, if we have the 33 million, what would we do with that money to leverage it? If after we get money from the state in a second phase, what could we do? More of the same and perhaps a little broader. I believe that we will be in this business 3 to 5 years. This is a 3 to 5 year deal. We're setting up for the long-term view. In the motion that was introduced by Councilmen Garcetti and Alarcon, and my sincere thanks for that clarification, also gave us the opportunity, with the approval of this committee and ultimately the City Council and the Mayor, to go forward and establish the nonprofit holding company that I am absolutely certain we need to acquire and dispose of property in an open process. What we are attempting to do is establish what is essentially a municipal nonprofit that only carries out the wishes of the city, because the program that you will ultimately approve is the program that they can implement, and they can't implement anything other than the wishes that are laid out in the policy of that program. But we need to have a place to limit liability. We need to have a place where we can hire, because HUD now has come forward in this and granted a 10% admin fee. Thank whatever you believe in, because we were in trouble if they did not do that. And it will allow us to do, those are exempt positions, right? Because those positions go when the money goes. All right. That is true generally in CDD and in LHD. We have programs like that that are completely dependent on funding, and so the tenure of anybody who works with us is also dependent on that funding, and they know that. It gives us the opportunity to come forward, and I'm going to need your assistance to come forward here and in personnel, because I'm going to need exemptions, job exemptions, so that we hire the exact talent that we need to put this program through, particularly as we're looking at project managers and some real estate experts to get this moving. The model that we're looking at is coming out of the city of New York, who did this quite successfully, both for multifamily and for single family. And that's how it's handled. It's a municipal nonprofit. And it goes forward and just implements the will of the people through the program that you all would have passed. And it allows us to do this in a very open fashion. For instance, one of the issues we face here is one of underwriting. Councilman Cardenas spoke about it quite eloquently, I thought, today. It is a very important issue, this issue of underwriting. Because as we work with the state of California on tax credit allocations, for instance, they have a very set, clear, consistent underwriting process for any developer that comes forward for tax credits, right? The same thing with the housing department in the state of California. They have clear underwriting. This money will not be going to them necessarily. Some deals might. We may leverage for tax credits for rehab, right? But for many that don't, particularly single-family homes, it is the city of Los Angeles that must do the underwriting. So we have to be very careful that we're making it clear what is appropriate and what is not. And as such, you'll recall that when we did the moderate income homebuyer program, that is something that only the city of LA is underwriting, we were very careful about what that underwriting criteria is. For instance, in the moderate income homebuyer program, we require at least 300 homes have to have been completed by the applicant as an underwriting for experience, right? We allow people to partner together, right? So that you could have, for instance, a smaller nonprofit partner with either a larger nonprofit or a for-profit to come forward and meet that experience requirement, so that we know when we're handing over these dollars that it's going to get done, right? So it's among the type of underwriting. I will be very clear with everyone about what we recommend to ensure that we're both giving people the opportunity to get in, particularly those that work within these communities, but that they are partnered with people who have the experience so that we succeed. Because if we do not do that, we will hurt our chances in a second, third, and fourth round of funding opportunity, right? So you all know what I'm talking about. You all know the kind of pressure that I could be under. And what I'm suggesting is that we have to take a look at the long ball, right? I would like to make sure that we're not getting 33 million, but 100 million. And we can only do that if we do it in an open process that is ensuring that is both, as you've heard me say before, that is simple and flexible. Right? So that it ensures we get what we want, but it allows for partnering without jeopardizing the liability of the city in any way. So those are the larger things that we're looking at. The issues of eligibility are important because, for instance, you have to be a foreclosed property or abandoned property or vacant to be qualified, right? So we can't go and buy the homes of folks who are not in foreclosure, who are just in trouble. That's not what this is. This is a neighborhood stabilization program. There's also an income limit. We have to set aside 25% of the dollars to service those that are at 50% or below of AMI, which is $37,900 at the moment for a family of 4. There are ways to do that. We have given you both the briefing that we sent out, and we've given you a longer briefing. It'll be on our website, but we're distributing it widely so that people see where it is. We're open to do briefings with individual council people, whatever you all need. And what we have also begun to do to help make these decisions is we have started, you remember when I was last here, I did this large map that laid out where we were from a multifamily and a single family perspective. Well, what we're doing to allow and help you, the policymaker, make these decisions is that we're now breaking down those maps into individual council district maps. Given my affection for you and the need to move this here, we have chosen your 5 districts, shucks, as the first ones that we would look at. So I want to particularly thank our policy unit, and particularly this young woman, Claudia Monterosa, who was up very late, making sure that we had maps for each of these 5 city council districts first. But this is an idea of what you will see. There are some important information here. Many of you have redevelopment areas within your districts. It is important, we believe, to get a sense, for you to get a sense, the redevelopment, obviously, the CRA to have a sense of how does this work vis-a-vis all the other things that are going on. This is a neighborhood stabilization program. So what we would really like is that as we come meet with you, that you have the information so that you can consider, having met with your staff, having met with CRA staff, having met with anybody that is necessary, that you deem necessary, about where, if you did a targeted area, and when I mean targeted, I mean small, okay? Given the amount of money in phase 1, 33 million, we have to do several things with that money. One, we have to use some of it for admin, 3 million, to get us through, and that is for the life of all of that money that we use, right? There's no more. It's just a one-time admin fee for that bulk. We have to, what I'm hoping we'll do, is start to negotiate a separate acquisition facility, something that parallels the New Generation Fund, maybe even within the New Generation Fund, to take a chunk of this 33 million and leverage it up so that we are actually using outside capital for acquisition, not the 33 million. Because that will buy us a lot more. And that gets to the question of how many units can we do, whether they're single family or multifamily. It depends on what we leverage up, right? To the degree that we're successful in doing that, that will allow us to serve more homes because we can use the bulk of the 33 million for rehab, right? And for a soft second loan rather than for acquisition. If we have to use it for acquisition, we're doing very little. Right? If we can use it for rehab and soft seconds, this first 33 million could get us anywhere from between 250 homes on a conservative side to 500 units on a more liberal side, depending on a per unit cost. I don't know yet. It depends on what mix you choose, and we will go back and forth with you and always tell you we think this is what it buys if you make that decision. But I want to, for instance, in Councilwoman Perry's district, I worry about your district, as I know you do, but you should know that you're not alone, that LHD also spends a good amount of time being concerned about it because of the real, can you give me that, the real concentration in your district of multifamily. Let me give you an idea what we've been thinking about. In your district, we're targeting, all right, how many multifamily units do we have? You can see that in 297 buildings, you have 757 units that are in foreclosure. But we also are noting for everyone, how many of these buildings are 5 units or more? Because obviously we would want to focus on larger buildings, they're cheaper, and the need to preserve is greater. There are opportunities, particularly because in the multifamily properties have a greater chance of being along a transit corridor. right? So they have a chance to be eligible for tax credits for rehab. They also have the opportunity to have some other parallel investment that you're making with the redevelopment agency that I don't know about. And we want you to be able to look at what is your best opportunity, right? It is also true that given that the councilwoman has no track, there's no census tract in CD9 that is above 120% of AMI. None. So that means that virtually her entire district is eligible when you look at the different, among the different categories of where the housing is, because there are none above 120. Now, that means that as we take a look at a set-aside of money, perhaps putting 50% or below, right? One idea that we think actually works and will work well with these is doing a bundling of multifamily properties, right? Putting out an RFP as a bundle. Most of the buildings in CD9, that this will be true for anybody that is not in the valley, are going to be rent-controlled units. They were built before 1978, the great majority of them. So that means that mainly we have the issue of these are foreclosed on properties, much like the one where Bernard Parks and Councilman Garcetti led when we had Countrywide trying to evict people, right? They're going to be in this situation. So we're certainly going to honor their rights, but an opportunity might be to do a couple of things with $1. With the same dollar, we may be able to preserve something on a corridor. We may be able to preserve something that actually buttresses another investment that the redevelopment agency may be making. We may be able to save a rent-controlled property, as such preserve it, and ultimately we may be able to preserve that rent-controlled property so that it now gets a covenant on it. So that when those folks move, if they're beyond 50% of AMI, when they move out, it would then go down and it would be set aside for people at 50% or below. So we're looking at this to come back with you with options, district by district, of what is the absolutely best opportunity we have in your district to leverage the dollars and make an impact. And that is why we're taking the time and getting down to the street level in your districts so that you can see it, so that you can meet with all the constituencies that you would meet with to make the best possible decision. I believe that the first targets, we can probably have no more than 5 or 6 targets that were in with maybe a 7 to 10 block radius, right? And it might be something like this. In an area that has multifamily property, we may want to target for that set aside, right, to bundle. In an area that has single-family homes, for instance, we may want to do something different. It may be that if an individual homeowner came in to the housing department and said, I have a walk-in, just like we used to, just like our normal programs. And if they get a foreclosed property that they can purchase within the targeted areas that we've agreed to, we would give them an acquisition rehab loan, right? But I would limit the rehab. My recommendation is to limit the rehab to systems. So that if it's a new roof, it's new plumbing, it's new electrical, rather than, a new outside barbecue or a new lot of things. Because what we find is we have to get to scale. The housing department will not have the time or the opportunity to be monitoring, huge expansions, right? So it's about taking the house as it is, making it work. More than habitable, new systems, make sure it lasts another 20, 25 years. On a walk-in basis. But if it is a home that the nonprofit entity acquires within that 7 to 10 block radius, then we would seek to do more, because now we're talking true neighborhood stabilization with vendors, rehab specialists that would have gone through a competitive process, right, and that are being monitored by the housing department for inspection like anything else we do, whether it's in the trust fund or in rehab. There, for instance, in South LA, regardless of where it is in South LA, I know that the housing stock tends to be smaller. We might have a great lot size, but the houses are 2 bedrooms, 1 bath. If we're talking neighborhood stabilization, how to use the $1 to make it last 30 years, what I would do there is do what we did in the EHOP program, which is to right-size the house and make it a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Along with the systems change. But that's under a different kind of program where we're really controlling the quality, right, as opposed to an individual rehabber that comes in much more difficult, and actually stabilizing that neighborhood by bringing in families to the right-sized home. So this is what I mean, that we have many opportunities. I'm I'm wanting to be as flexible as I can while moving to scale, taking into account the nature of the different neighborhoods that we have to service. And so that's where we are now. We will absolutely come. You have asked me before. I appreciate the councilwoman putting on the record. She has told me before, as have many of you. But we thought that the best way to begin was to really work on the mapping so that you can see for yourselves what lies in your district and what it is you might want to do given the outlines of this program and within what gets us to scale. I will stop there and take all the
Okay.
questions I'm able to answer.
All right. Well, first of all, you have our word that we won't tell the other 10 council members that you like us better than them. Okay? We will not say that, okay? What I want to do is, Mr. Garcetti, I'd like for you to take the lead on this. Know that there were some questions and suggestions that I believe that you had that Ms. Perry had read into the record as well.
Thank you. Then I may be well covered, so I'll. Did we talk about the Attorney General settlement with Countrywide?
Not yet.
Okay. Just one question there. I ran into Attorney General, and we talked a little bit about the settlement, but I wanted to know whether any of that, whether the settlement, if we've looked at that or spoken to the Attorney General's office and seen whether any of that could lead to renegotiation of any of existing Countrywide held mortgages here.
We've already reached out to get a copy so I can read it.
Okay.
So I hadn't gotten it yet, so I will. But so I have just a general understanding. I think that if we're lucky, that settlement will focus more on families that are still in their homes, right? That will help us because it will take the pressure off getting any more that are vacant. So they'll work most probably in a complementary way by limiting the number that go further go further into the process of foreclosure. So that to the degree, Councilman, that we start to get a universe that stops growing, right? That will help. We'll get the third quarter information on foreclosures and defaults next week. So you will see the next generation of these maps will now be 2007 and the third quarter as well. So you'll have, an even more detailed map. But, that countrywide settlement could help quell that number. And then everybody will feel more comfortable to make the decisions because you're not so concerned about how many more are we going to get.
In terms of other policy that could be useful from the federal level or from a new president, no matter who that is, what are some of the other areas that we should be looking at and advocating? There's a real opening right now, I think, in terms of policy initiatives, and obviously folks are increasingly and still looking at foreclosures, and appreciate the work that you did, and I want to thank Sarah Dussault and my staff and others who were in D.C. directly negotiating to make sure some of this served us. It didn't come out perfectly, but it came out better than I think it was going to be with H.R. 3221. Any initiatives you might suggest to us that we could begin kind of lobbying on today, advocating for within campaigns, et cetera?
Well, I would say that as we look at the issues of fair share, what I think it is appropriate that we start being recognized for our proactive efforts, right? To be treated like everybody else, people who don't have a trust fund, right? Communities that don't make a commitment, particularly in hard economic times. It is time that we were recognized for that. It'll help, I think, pull all boats up because then everyone else will start to have to take a look at this crisis and certainly not look at us like everybody else. So I think it may be for the first time, given that this program is being deemed high risk, this may be the first time that we're rewarded, not because we have a trust fund, but because our preparedness, because we've done all this work already, will speak for itself and we will compete better. So I'm really looking for that. That is also true particularly on the National Affordable Housing Trust Fund. While we're not likely to see anything in the next couple of years, it'll first go to the Gulf region. There has to be a recognition of what we've already done and what we're committing ourselves. So I think that's important. I can tell you that Chairwoman Waters had already spoken to me, and we've already sent her lots of information about our trust fund because she wanted to work out how to help mirror that and how that would work better. You should also know that, interestingly, usually, how Washington is, it stops just east of the Rockies. Often they're thinking. And the thinking in Washington, I can tell you for having suffered through that on myself, is usually north and south thinking. There's not a lot of east and west thinking going on. I'm hoping that will change. But I've received an invitation from the Federal Reserve Board itself to go to Washington in a couple of weeks and actually present nationally to them about what we're doing. So it is, people are starting to take notice that we have changed and that we're now leading in this area nationally. So we're getting there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, before, I just want to, where's Saeed? Would you come forward? Want to let Saeed make a quick statement on behalf of Councilman Alarcon and then Mr. Cardenas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it, Mr. Speaker. Councilman Alarcon wanted me to be here this morning to urge the committee, the chair, and the committee members to perhaps as a policy establish some basis for where the city emphasizes the work that will need to be done to assist people facing foreclosure. One basis may be, one basis for that would be the percentage of home ownership. As you know, in the valley districts have the highest percentage of home ownership amongst all the 15 districts in the city. The problem is nationwide, or obviously citywide. In our district, the 7th district, home ownership is, I believe, the highest. It's about 55% of the residents live in homes that they own. And the foreclosure problem is also the most severe, which is why beginning last year in June 2007, the councilman appeared before this committee with a number of motions asking the city to take some steps and the federal and the state government to take steps to alleviate the problems. On Monday night at Mary Immaculate Parish, we had over 300 homeowners for over 3.5 hours, all of whom are themselves either in foreclosure or facing foreclosure. So it's a very severe problem in the 7th district. It's a problem across the city, across the state, across the nation. But the councilman wanted me to be here this morning. He's on his way in, and if he can make it, he will be here himself. I thank you for the opportunity.
Well, thank you, Saeed. It was a pleasure. And since you did, in fact, warn us that he's en route, we will hurry up and we will. Mr. Cardenas, then Mr. Reyes.
Yeah, we definitely are one city, the second largest city in the country. But when you look at the handful of maps that you provided us, for example's sake, not priority's sake, to the other council members on the council, when you look at District 1, which is not in the San Fernando Valley, they have 182 single-family units, but then it jumps to 305 2 to 4 units. And I'll just skip the red squares, which is 5 units or more. And then in my district, which is the only district in the valley on this committee, we have 866 single-family units and only 66 2 to 4 units. And then when we go back to outside the valley, we have 369 single-family units, and it jumps to 757 2 to 4 units that are affected. And then again, in District 10, which is in Los Angeles, not in the this side of Los Angeles, not in the San Fernando Valley, we have 338 single-family units and 283 2 to 4 units. And then in the 13th district, closer to the valley, but still not, 127 single units and 297 2 to 4 units. So I think what that does, Mercedes, is that makes your job a lot tougher to try to apply this in a fair and appropriate manner when the districts vary so much as to where the main emphasis or where the biggest issue is in that community, who's affected the most. How can you, with guidelines and staff and all that stuff, how can you keep that balance?
What I'm hoping, that is, thank you for that question. It is hard. But I would say to you that ultimately our investment in data and this understanding is what will ultimately serve us well, because we won't be speaking anecdotally. about what it might be. And that's why I'm distributing all the maps to everyone, so that everybody can see and have, we're going to put them on the web, let everybody see what's really going on to make the best possible policy decision. What we're looking at now are aggregates, and we'll distribute these as well. We'll know by city council district, what is your percentage of single family in the city? What was your percentage of multifamily in the city? And what is your blended rate in the city? We will then also start to break them down, and we're almost there on this, so you should have this very soon from us. Also take a look at putting that side by side with where you are in redevelopment, how that works with your redevelopment funds, so that you can make decisions, and if you want to make additional investment
I failed.
of redevelopment funds.
Thank you.
Right, so you get a lot.
Okay.
Just under the wire.
Mr. Reyes.
Just real quick, I've been reading your definition on foreclosure, and what's still, I'm not sure if it's clear yet in anybody's mind, but you have groups of people who are not making payments, but they're being notified. There's other folks who've been stringing along payments, hanging on to their home, but they're not out yet. I mean, who are we serving? Are the folks who've been told by the bank you're out by X day, or is the people that are sliding into it? Is there a way of determining that? Because there's a lot of frantic people out there, and I'm not sure how to answer them.
As we go through different policy measures, both federally and statewide, the definition of foreclosure changes for each bill as they decide what they want to handle. So, for instance, in this bill, right, so for the purposes of this program, we're following the definitions in the regulations that HUD has issued for HR 3221. And here, this is what it means, okay? It must be a foreclosed property to
Right.
qualify.
So the house is already vacant.
Vacant or abandoned. So yes, it has to have been vacant, but they may not have completely finished the legal title, but they have to be out. Right? So for the purposes of this, that's what it is. As we go forward on other, and I believe that there will be other foreclosure measures, that is meant to help save people and keep them in their homes. This is not what this is. This was meant to speak particularly to the bulk that has already been done. Now, even that, you could, under what kind of foreclosure process it is, that it could either have gone completely through the foreclosure proceeding, or it could take, if we purchase it, a transfer in lieu of foreclosure. But it has to have been foreclosed on. This is not about folks who are in default.
Okay, so with a straight face, I can say this city is not only worried about the buildings, but it's also worried about its people. But this program is worried about the buildings.
Well, this program is worried about neighborhoods.
But again, not the people.
Well, which people? This is, I guess,
The
what I
people
would...
living,
yes, the individuals that were already foreclosed on is not the focus of this bill. There will be others, not this one. But what it does also do, it's worried about the homeowners next door.
No, I understand the neighborhood context. I do.
Okay.
But I just want to be clear that right now we're focused on those empty structures that will influence
right.
people in neighborhoods in the long run. But for the meantime, the tenants or the folks who used to live there are basically, they're gone.
Except in multifamily properties where if you're foreclosed on and a bank now owes you, the tenant is still there.
Okay.
And that's over 3,000 of the 13,000 units we're dealing with, you have tenants still in place.
Okay.
Is that it, Mr. Reyes?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, with that said, Mr. Alarcon, I want you to know that Saeed did a phenomenal job, but we both know he's a class act.
He took all 3 minutes, too.
Yeah. So anyway,
Mr. Chair, I appreciate the extended time to allow me to speak. Saeed is a very polite and articulate professional, and I'm a little more real when it comes to dealing with issues of fairness. First of all, let me say thank you to Ms. Perry for talking about equity and fairness and prioritization. Clearly, the damage has been most severe in my district as number one, but in the San Fernando Valley, it's very severe. Now, I haven't looked at the numbers citywide specifically, but when I hear somebody say that the federal government is more concerned north to south, but not so good on east to west, we need to fight for a fair share for Los Angeles, and in the same conversation, say that she wants to work with this committee's members first, when the highest concentration of foreclosures is not represented on this panel, is insulting. It's insulting to those people who have been victims of foreclosure, and I will not let it stand. So I'm glad that you held the time, Mr. Weston, although it was because Tony was speaking. But I was listening, and I was very disturbed.
You know that.
I was very disturbed by the comments made by Ms. Marquez.
So there was
I
no
will-
intent to offend you, sir.
On my
Wait,
time.
Mercedes, wait. Go on.
Whatever patronage was being played, I want to make it clear that I will not stand for any kind of patronization unless it is based on the numbers, the prioritization of where the problem exists. And I don't care whether my district is dead last. If we do it by that equation, I'll be very pleased. But as Said was saying, we had 300 people. It wasn't just 300 people. It was one LA organizing the San Fernando Valley to make a loud statement that we will get our fair share. I don't know if it was a if it was misspeak on behalf of the general manager, but I rushed in here because I need to make it very clear. The San Fernando Valley is one of the largest communities in the country with the highest number of foreclosures as compared to just about anywhere in the country. And to hear that comment that she's going to work with the committee members first, I think is just inappropriate.
Mr. Chair-
Wait. Let me make this crystal clear to you. This committee that I chair will be very fair. This committee will review all of the information, and we realize that just because we're on this committee, that does not mean that we get any special treatment. This committee represents the entire city of Los Angeles, and we do recognize that this problem is citywide. So you can be assured that the concerns of the east side, the west side, north and south of this city we will look at that very seriously. We recognize we're in a serious situation. We recognize we don't have the funds to do everything that we would like to do. I think that we are moving forward to try to maximize the money that we hope that we will get, and we will distribute it in a fair fashion. And I give you my word that the individuals from the Valley, or the individuals from East LA, or the individuals from South Central LA, everybody will be dealt with in a fair fashion. And Mercedes, I just want to put you on hold for 2 seconds, let Ms. Perry say something, and then Mr. Reyes, and then I'd like for you to make a statement that you would address to our colleague. Ms. Perry.
Thanks. And I don't know, Mr. Alarcon, if you were able to hear the motion that I made, and that I did emphasize that all council offices should be involved with the housing department, and I believe Ms. Marquez agrees in selecting the sites in each council district for funding pursuant to this bill. And I'm sure you know as well as I do. And I was actually surprised on the Greg Smith being in this category of yourself, Mr. Zine, and Mr. Smith being among the highest 3 council districts for single-family foreclosures. It makes sense that it would be single-family because you have the preponderance of that, and then in the southern part and mid-cities, we are heavier on multifamily in terms of the level of foreclosure for multifamily. But I don't understand. I guess I'm a little confused as to why in the context of all the comments made, I don't see any patronage going on here. I think that we're attempting to communicate in a very, very direct, very candid way, and receiving it in kind back from the department, which I appreciate, and I think I'll say publicly, I appreciate Mercedes' very forthright responses, because it's often difficult with other departments to get the same sort of response, the same sort of information, the same sort of treatment, and the same sort of success rate in terms of spending money where it's supposed to be spent, where it has been allocated, where it has been encumbered in those respective districts. So, I thought our discussion was very forthright on both sides, on committee members and housing department. And, I'm sorry if you felt otherwise, but I can assure you that everybody's been touched by this, and everybody has a bit of gray in their districts, which indicates income by census tract of 120% area median income or below. So,
by way of a point of information,
even the 11th district has an area that has foreclosures.
just to provide a point of information, to provide some perspective, the San Fernando Valley, when I was chair of housing, I used to know the numbers a lot better, so I'll speak to those about 5 years ago when I was chair of housing for the Senate. The fact of the matter is that 7 out of 10 homes purchased at that time in the San Fernando Valley were purchased by Latino families. 2 of the other 3 were purchased by an Asian Pacific Islander family, and then the other one was a variety of other things. The bottom line is that the foreclosure problem, the subprime lending, was targeting minority communities. The reason that you see such high rates in Greg Smith's district and Dennis Zine district are those are first-time, typically minority home buyers that got the shaft like everybody else in other poorer communities, but had reached middle-class level, and nevertheless are back to square one. And so that's why there was a high concentration of available housing and a high concentration of transition of the community to be more reflective of Los Angeles as a whole.
Mr. Reyes.
Yeah, I'll be real succinct. I saw some intrepidation when Mercedes did mention the maps, and she did say that her staff stood up very, very late trying to draw out the maps, put it in place just for this committee, but I did not believe, and I don't think I heard that it was going to have any preferential treatment to the committee members. So I understand the intensity that you're going through. We all are going through all that, and in particular, you see it with an extra set of lenses because of the X-ray vision you have, given your experience of that chairmanship that you spoke to. And so again, I see you did a great job in talking about the meeting in your district, the 300 folks. So I can imagine the intensity and emotion that's involved there, and that's very real. But not once did I sense in any way that Mercedes was compromising or in any way favoring any one entity in this committee or any other one in any district in the city. So I just want to say that for the record, and because I think that was very important to state.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Reyes. And
fact,
again,
my comments
Mercedes, before this is, like I said, we are in a hell of a crisis, and I think that the city, that we're glad that we have you at this point in time because of your skills. So I feel very confident that based on you and your staff that we will compete well, that we will get our share and more. And again, at this very difficult time, I just think we're fortunate to have you with us.
My comment really was only as I was actually showing some gratitude to my staff who stayed very late to make sure we had maps. It was not about who to work with, it was only about maps. But what she told me this morning is because we are so conscious of the problem in CD7, sir, we actually have your map as well.
Thank you. All right.
See? Yeah, next time I know to let Mercedes, maybe I should have let you speak before the rest of us. Anyway, before we vote on this, and we do have to get downstairs, we have one public comment card. If Mr. Weiss would come forward. Oh, wait 1 second. Mercedes, when will you be able to have a report back, realistically?
Well, I think our timelines are so tight that we just need to keep moving. So
why don't you just
another 2 weeks, and we'll come back with more. We're pushing. We still now have to finish the rest of the mapping this week so that we can distribute it to every other member. So it doesn't make sense to kind of come back until I've had the opportunity.
do it.
So everybody has equal information.
Let's do it this way. If you could just stay in contact with my office, and then when you have enough data, then we'll quickly get you back here. We won't require you to be back if it's not put together at that point in time.
Correct.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Mr. Weiss?
Thank you, Mr. Weston. Very quickly. Number one, I appreciate Ms. Perry's reference to the multifamily because, again, TOPA can be applied in this situation. There's no question about it, and probably get a bigger bang for the buck. Number two, in terms of asking the Housing Department to give you the policy directives, it's up to the council to make the policy. This idea, and if we frankly had a housing policy debate and discussion in the last year or two, it'd be a little bit easier to get to these allocation issues. Three, there has to be some speculator protection involved in this situation. We got into the mess because of basically subsidizing speculation. You can't do it in this context. Four, with regard to the question of possibly there may be waivers with regard to some of these issues. The fact of the matter is that the tenants can and should be in a position to be able to buy. Combine that with what you did, Herb, what was it, June of '07, with the extra $5 million that you got for those tenants out of the CDBG. You got to look at that potential alternative. Next, we have a situation with regard to how the city can help its own employees, firemen, policemen, you want to attract. Maybe some of these are down near schools. What about trying to get some potential benefits as far as the community ownership? From the neighborhood council standpoint, look at this from a bottom-up potential, not a top-down. Housing department is top-down. That is the problem. You guys set the policy. I think things will basically begin to fall into place. That's basically short but sweet. Thank you.
Thank you. So then, Mr. City Attorney and CLA, we want to move forward, adopt this motion, plus we want to move forward on the Perry Reyes. And did you say you were going to give copies of that to the clerk? Or? Okay.
So it's the motion as amended by Ms. Perry.
Yes. All right. Any more items before this committee?
Mr. Weston, there is a technical amendment on item 8 provided by staff that I neglected to read. They were just requesting that the Housing Department be authorized to extend the loan agreement with Habitat for Humanity for the Pierce Borden project to reflect a new expiration date of April 30th, 2010.
Can we just add that, or do we have to reconsider the item, or can we just attach that to item 8?
Why don't you just re-vote on that item?
Okay, so let's just to make it safe on item 8, without objection, we will adopt that motion plus the amendment. No more matters before this committee. This committee's adjourned.
Thank you, sir.
For